In this video, we'll be reviewing trigonometry, but we're going to learn now how to solve for missing sides of right triangles. So your first steps are still the same. You're going to label your H, O, and A, your hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent sides, and then you'll decide if you're using SOH CAH TOA. Once you set up your trig ratio, that's where the steps get a little bit different from when we were solving for angles. So here, if you look at example number 1, I'm going to start by labeling my sides. And I'm going to label the hypotenuse first. The hypotenuse is always opposite the 90-degree angle. Next, I'm going to label my opposite angle. So opposite of 71 degrees would be X. And then this would be at my adjacent side. I'm going to cross this one out because there's nothing there, so we can't use it. And I'm going to use so because O and H come out in the word so. So when I set up my trig ratio, I would write sine. This time my angle is 71 degrees equals, and then you put O over H. Here O is X and H is 31. So same steps as before. Now we actually know an angle. So instead of sine of whatever angle they put there, we actually insert the number. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to cross multiply. I'm going to write it as a proportion first. So here on this side, I'm going to put an imaginary 1 on the bottom. Now I cross multiply. So here I'm going to do 31 times sine 71. On this side, 1 times x is just x. So in the calculator, I'm going to go to calculator.net, just like we did last week. I'm going to plug in 31 times sine 71. So from here, we go to calculator. So I'm going to plug in 31 times sine 71. And I'm going to round my answer to the nearest 10. So here it would be 29.3. So x would equal 29.3, and that would be the length of that missing side. Here on question 2, I'm going to label my hypotenuse. Then we're looking at angle 28 degrees. This would be opposite, and this would be adjacent. I'm going to cross off the opposite side because there's nothing there for us to use. So I'm left with A and H, which comes out in CAH. So we have cos 28 degrees equals A over H. A is X, H is 19. I'm going to write the left side as a proportion, so I'm going to put it over an imaginary 1. That way I can cross multiply. So here I'm going to do 19 times cos 28. And here x times 1 is just x. So in the calculator, I'm going to do 19 times cos 28. Let me clear it. 19 times cos 28. And that comes out to about 16.8. Let's go ahead and look at example 3. So here I'm going to label my sides. This would be my hypotenuse because it's opposite the 90. I'm looking at angle 38. X is opposite, so 27 would be adjacent. I'm going to cross out my hypotenuse because that has nothing next to it that we can use. So I'm left with an O and an A, which comes out in TOA. So now I'm going to set up my trig ratio. Tan 38 degrees equals O over A. Here our O is X and our A is 27. And I'm going to write this left side over an imaginary 1 so that it's a proportion. And now I can cross multiply. So here I'm doing 27 times tan 38 degrees equals X. And I'm going to go to my calculator and plug that in. That comes out to about 21.1. Now, if we look at the next example, I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to label my hypotenuse. This is my angle, so 27 would be opposite. This side would be adjacent. I'm going to cross out the A because there's nothing there we can use, so I'm left with an H and an O. Those come out in so. So I'm going to set up my trig ratio, sine 48 degrees equals O over H, or 27 over X. And I'm going to do this side over an imaginary 1. This one's different than the other problems because here, when we cross multiply, we're going to get things on both sides. So here I'm going to do X times sine 48. Here 1 times 27 is 27. So X is not by itself like in the other problems. They're multiplying it. The opposite of multiplying would be divide. So I'm going to divide by sine 48 on both sides. That way we can get X by itself. And now we just plug it into the calculator. So in the calculator, I'm going to plug in 27 divided by sine 48. This time it comes out to 36.3. So a little different. It usually depends where your X or where your variable that you're solving for ends up on that fraction. Notice here X was on the bottom. So since it was on the bottom, we actually ended up dividing when we solved our problem. On the other ones, when X was on top, we ended up multiplying. So here, this is my hypotenuse. This is my angle. So this would be opposite. This would be adjacent. I'm going to cross out the O because there's nothing else there we can use. So I'm left with A and H, which come out in CAH. So I would say cos 14 degrees equals A over H, which is 38 over X. Here I'm going to put an imaginary 1 so I can cross multiply. So I get X cos 14 equals 38. And then since I want to get X by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by cos 14. Here they cancel, so I get X equals 38 over cos 14 degrees, and I can plug that into a calculator. So here I get 39.2. My next problem, I'm going to label my hypotenuse. We're looking at angle 74, so 29 would be opposite. X would be adjacent. I'm going to cross out the H because we're not going to use that one. So we're left with O and A, which come out in TOA. So I'm going to set up my ratio, tan 74 degrees equals O over A, so 29 over X. Here I'm going to put an imaginary 1. Now I cross multiply, so I have X times tan 74 degrees equals 1 times 29, or 29. Here I would divide by tan 74 because I want to get X by itself. So I'm left with X equals, if you do 29 over tan 74 on a calculator, that comes out to 8.3. So here X would equal 8.3. So just to summarize, you're setting the problem up like you did before. It's just now you're either going to have to multiply whatever's on the denominator times SOH CAH or TOA, your sine, cos, or tan. If your X is on the denominator, then you're going to divide instead. So just be careful when you're setting these up.